How does brand engagement affect recruitment? Well, of course, recruitment advertising can be quite substantial for large organisations, and recruitment itself is an expression of the company's brand. Of course, in the bad old days, recruitment used to be sidelined either to an agency or somebody who sat in the corner of HR and put the tombstone ads in the various employee press, and hopefully that would produce the right candidates. Of course, these days it's become much more sophisticated, and with sophistication and with the longevity of things being on the internet for quite a while, particularly corporate Facebooks, where you can go back for years and years to see who said what and why, the whole issue of, well, shouldn't we look a bit more professional? Is our logo really that colour? What are our values when we're talking to potential recruits? How do we get the best recruits? How do we warm them up for them to actually apply, say, this time next year, rather than just going to the marketplace because we want somebody right now? So brand engagement is very pertinent to the whole recruitment cycle. And when you're talking about the values of the organisation, it's right up there in their face. Because the important thing is not to just put the values in the recruitment advertising, and then when they come and join you, the actual way the operation works is completely different. I mean, the whole thing about brand engagement is honesty about the values and the way you work and the processes. So whatever you put in the recruitment advertising has to actually be true, because you will have spent a lot of money to recruit the right sort of people in certain key roles, only to find that they leave 3 months later because they discover that what it said in the ad wasn't actually how the company works. So recruitment is an integral part of brand engagement, and it is a key area and should not be forgotten as a sort of sideline of something to tack on to the whole programme when the time is right. Employee engagement can often be described as a single figure. So you might say that the employee engagement in your organisation is 65%. That's not bad. That's sort of average. If it's 40%, you're struggling. If it's 85%, that's marvellous. But the problem with having a single figure for employee engagement belies the fact that it's an average. And if you have 10,000 staff, you could have some departments that are doing extremely well on employee engagement and other departments that are doing extremely badly. But as far as the C-suite is concerned, everything's fine and we're behaving normally. So employee engagement certainly needs a benchmarking before you start to make sure that you're doing the right thing in terms of your particular market sector before you drill down into the detail. Employee engagement is probably the key factor at the moment in the States of the Fortune 500 companies in terms of investors deciding what to invest in and what not to invest in. In the States, you can now look up the details of employee engagement levels in public companies in the States, and those levels will often cause brokers to either agree or not agree that this company is a good long-term bet. So it's becoming one of those key factors, like the value of a brand used to be a key factor. And in the very old days, your profit and loss forecast used to be a key factor. Now, because a lot of the large organisations work in very similar ways, in very similar global markets, selling very similar things, think of cars and think of insurance, you have to think of a difference between one company and another. So if you're going to the market for more money for investment, you have to have that extra bit that nobody else has. And if one of those bits is employee engagement, then it makes sense to use that as a tool to promote the business. Interesting enough, people with high levels of employee engagement are de facto, through research, more profitable than companies that have low levels of engagement. Now that seems obvious, but it's actually one reason why you should do it. So it's not to be nice and fluffy with the employees and to be a good citizen, is actually to be more profitable and sustainable, and that's what it's all about. And there's a chapter in the book about how to go about working out whether brand engagement is a financial aid to the business or not. Social media, of course, is the big talking point at the moment, and I think we have moved on from it being a student notice board to put silly pictures up on the internet and laugh about, to being a serious medium for most employees. The most interesting aspect of social media is the way it highlights the generation gap. There is this dichotomy at the moment between the baby boomers, who were born sort of just after the Second World War, and Generation Y, who were born from the year 2000 or 1990, 2000 onwards. And there's a big divide between the two types of approaches to life and communications in particular. You may have noticed in your own company that the C-suite are 50 plus, some are 60 plus, and they will have missed the internet and the Facebook and the social media generation, and the people who are actually doing the work and managing the processes are in their 30s, and they are totally au fait with social media, and at any given day they might have 3 or 4 devices on them in their various bags and pockets, as well as 2 or 3 devices that the company provides. Now, if you contrast the communication possibilities of that with a typical board who work from fixed desktop PCs and a BlackBerry, and that's it, and they don't really use social media at all, you then begin to see what the issue is between a 2-tier communication strategy. At the top end, you've got all the policies and the values and the structures, and they're promulgated down, a bit like as if you're in the army. But then the people who do the work in the middle are all talking about the issues on an ongoing basis, almost on a half-hourly basis. And you will have noticed in your working life that what used to take weeks to resolve in terms of an internal policy issue could now be over in 20 minutes, simply because of the fact that you can talk about these things online through text or social media, and you don't actually even need to talk to anybody. My daughter's a good case in point. When she talks to me by text. I don't think I've ever had a phone call. And of course what drove that was the cost of doing a phone call as opposed to a text on a mobile. But even so, it's ingrained into 20s and 30 somethings that texting is the way to get messages through to people fast and effectively, rather than sending them an email or even ringing them up. So this whole change of focus on how do you communicate across a large organisation quickly and effectively is what social media is all about. And of course, brand engagement is the same thing. You can't have a board that doesn't engage with the staff if you're on 2 different platforms. It's a bit like talking 2 different languages. And if a board wants to have a meeting in 4 weeks' time about the way a car park is organised, it seems a bit silly when it can be organised by 30-somethings in 20 minutes. Ambassadorship and advocacy is part of brand engagement. Now, it sounds a bit highfalutin, but if you think of your organisation and think of who actually promotes your products and services, possibly without even being paid. So this might include some members of your distribution chain who promote but don't necessarily sell your product every time. It might include people who are part of your CSR program, your corporate social responsibility program. It could be part of a charity link that you've got who are very happy to support your organisation for nothing because they believe in the overriding values of what you do. And ambassadorship and advocacy are becoming more and more important, especially with the advent of social media, where the whole concept of liking things is becoming almost like a cri de coeur of all marketing people to get their product to be liked. Now, ambassadorship is the same thing. I don't necessarily buy this product every week. I didn't necessarily buy it last week, but I like this company. I like the way it goes about doing what it does, and I would fully recommend them. I mean, in the old days, it used to be referrals are the most inexpensive way to get new business, and particularly people who buy cars are so proud of the car that they bought that they tend to refer other people to buy the same product. Now that is ambassadorship in its purest form, because the guy who buys a car and recommends it to his neighbour is not actually being paid to do that, but he does it anyway. Now why is that? It's because he's engaged with the product he's got, and he's so engaged that he then recommends it to other people. And there are lots of areas in commercial life and in charity work where you can see this could work very well if only people could agree with or understand even the values that the company's got. The important thing about brand engagement is it's not just about employees. It's not just about salespeople. It's not just about the consumer. It's about all these people who do advocacy on the side, because it will be a disaster if you spend all this time putting together the values of your organisation and the advocates are saying something completely different. It's the difference between saying, with advertising, we provide simple quality products, and then when you try and buy one, it takes you about 3 weeks because the way to buy one is so complicated that in the end you just give up. One good example of this is the utilities industry, where in theory it's a dreadfully simple product. It's electrical current, or it's water, or it's gas. how simple can you get? There's no difference between the products, but they complicate it by the tariff and the pricing system and the way it's sold and who gets what and why. And these companies need to really wake up and smell the coffee and work out what their values are and keep them simple, not obfuscate things by making them so complicated that that's the way they keep loyal customers. Banks are similar. The whole thing about the banking strategy of years gone by is try and make the way you buy from a bank so complicated that nobody will ever switch. And now we have legislation that promises you can switch in a certain number of days. Now, that hasn't gone totally smoothly, but at least they're getting it, and they're realising that this inertia marketing is actually unproductive and doesn't reflect well on the financial sector.